Hello, welcome to another episode of Accelerated Velocity. This is Grace, and I'm here with Peter, and we're going to walk through a few big updates and some kind of wacky updates today.
Yeah, so you have to stick around till the end because at the end you're going to meet Grem. And Grem is the stuffed animal with a chatbot inside of it. And I'll tell you, Grace, I think it's wacky, but I think there's also parts of it that are not so wacky. And so I'll look forward to discussing that with you.
Yeah, I can't wait to get into that. And before we do, let's jump into a couple of maybe not as fun, but very important AI related updates that everybody should consider. So I want to start with looking at a new Google search statistic that everybody should know. And that is that Google's AI overview has been confirmed to show a 25% drop in referral traffic for cited sources. So there's a lot to this. The most important thing to think about is that this finding confirms this idea we've been talking about, that Google's AI overview is part of just one piece of the puzzle of this decrease in click-through rates that pretty much everybody is seeing, click-through rates to your website or any other platforms where your business might have a presence. And so what is the answer to this, or what does this mean for everybody? Because that sounds pretty scary, right? A 25% drop in referral traffic.
So, the first thing I thought about, Grace, is I was surprised, quite frankly, how low that is, because I've seen stats that are a lot more striking than that. And especially, I think, in regards to news sites and, just off the cliff statistics about click-throughs. And that's really what that overview was meant to do. It's meant to be a zero-click way of providing the searcher information. And by zero-click, which we've discussed before, it's like you don't have to make a click. You don't have to make a click to the person who actually wrote the content that they're displaying to you. You don't have to make a click. And so I think that circles back to another sort of recurring theme here, and that is that SEO is kind of dead, to be honest. And AEO, the answer engine optimization, is really taking over, and you only have a very limited amount of slots in order for somebody to have a way to click through to your site. I mean, typically in Google, traditionally they'd have like 10 listings on the first page of Google search. And that sort of took up 84% of the clicks out of a Google search. So essentially, at that time, there were 10 possibilities for you to get real traffic from a search. Well, with AI and AI search results, that number can be like 2 or 3 or 4 articles that are referenced with a link to them. And so it makes potentially being able to have search work for you much, much, much more difficult. So it's something that all businesses, especially like e-commerce businesses and virtually any sort of service, really need to pay attention to. And also, I feel, get involved in while there's still some land to be claimed, so to speak, because that's going to continue to change as bigger companies become more savvy on how to make AEO work for them. It's going to be very, very difficult for smaller companies like this one to compete.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And another thing to consider with that is that the concept of content authority, which is very traditional SEO kind of terminology, is different with AEO. And as you say, the sources that the AI overview is selecting is changing on sometimes a weekly basis, right? But there are some trends that we see. For example, once a company starts ranking as a source or getting referenced in an AI overview, even when the chosen sources change, that name, that brand name, tends to continue to appear in subsequent AI overviews. So there's some degree of that content authority that's still important. And so I think getting in early is a super big deal.
Yeah. No, I was going to say that's the point, is that's just another reason to jump on it.
Yeah, and another thing that I would stress is this idea of targeting the platforms in addition to just your website that you know your audience is looking for content on. For example, if you're B2B, LinkedIn has millions of daily users. So with the advent of AEO and this idea of search everywhere optimization, if you write a high-performing LinkedIn article, it's not just showing up on Google when people search for it, but people are actively searching for that information within the LinkedIn ecosystem itself. And the same goes for any other content ecosystem. So just thinking about where you want to be placing that high quality content. Before we move on to our last couple of updates, I also wanted to mention one other side of this, the developments in the Department of Justice's antitrust laws against Google. I think the important thing to consider is that content creators need to find ways to be creative and work with the system that we're working within now for success, but also to keep up to date on things like the antitrust case and see how that's developing.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And it's interesting. I mean, I think we could all agree, no matter which side of the aisle you're on or which side of the street, that the DOJ is looking at different things than they would have typically been looking at in past years. And so I'm really interested to see how that plays out in regards to this antitrust suit. I mean, personally, I think I've thought for a long, long time, and I'm, I'm certainly not alone in this, that Google has outsized influence and Google makes decisions about what we can and can't do. And that's the decision. It's not a governmental organization making rules. It's Google making the rules. And so I'm really interested to see how this plays out.
So another thing we wanted to introduce was a conversation around context engineering, which is a term that some of you might have heard of, and also some updates with GPT-5 that will impact context engineering if you're using ChatGPT. For anyone who's not familiar with the phrase context engineering, it plays off the context of prompt engineering. So there's a relatively recent wave of AI experts who are, repping the idea that prompt engineering is not an efficient or effective way of approaching AI use, whether you're using AI for very technical implementations or for other sorts of things like marketing campaigns or anything in between. And a lot of these thought leaders are encouraging people to move towards context engineering, which is a framework where you instead focus on building up your LLM of choice with relevant context to what you're doing, whether that's context about your project or your campaign or your organization or context specific to a certain output that you need. And that in itself will enhance the results that you're getting back versus scrutinizing over the engineering or the architecture of a prompt. And so, where GPT-5 and some of the recent updates with GPT-5 come in are changes to context windows. So context windows are measured by tokens. And for example, a specific chat on ChatGPT will have a context window of 8,000 tokens. So where GPT-5's updates come in here is that it's important to know the new tiers for context windows if you're a ChatGPT user. So the free tier is going to have a context window of 8,000 tokens per conversation. The plus tier is going to have 32,000 tokens per conversation. And Pro and Enterprise tiers will have 128,000 tokens. So the reason that we wanted to update everybody on this is that if you're using context engineering, which you should be, and you're not getting the results back that you want, you need to think about the context window on the LLM that you're using. So if you're on a free tier of ChatGPT and you're using the same exact approach as a plus or a pro user on the platform, you're not going to be getting back the same results. And this isn't a sales pitch to go buy ChatGPT Enterprise, but just to think about how those tokens are affecting the results that you're getting.
So 8,000 tokens in free, what does that actually mean?
So when it comes to text-based information, if you're just typing into the chat in ChatGPT, this is just for ChatGPT, but one token equals 4 characters. So about 1,500 words is going to be over just a little bit over 2,000 tokens.
And I'm certain there are tons of business users on a free chat GPT. And it's really important for them to be able to get the full value of the product. Is there any guidance that you've seen?
Yeah, so one thing, I mean, this is a very simple best practice, but the biggest thing would be to, no matter what model you're using, or plan you're using, to just compress files whenever you can. So the bigger the file size, the longer it's going to take for ChatGPT to process, the more energy you're going to use, which is never ideal, and the more tokens the LLM is going to use up for that conversation. So compress your file sizes, get more information in there. It's just like how our brains work to a certain extent, right? You know, the more concise the information, the more we're going to remember.
So consequently, it's a very important thing for people to understand, and especially for those who need to be getting the best and most accurate results out of ChatGPT.
So lastly, and this goes less specifically for token usage, but another best practice that I think is helpful to consider if you're new to context engineering is learning what your LLM already knows about you. So asking it questions like, tell me about me, or what do you know or remember about me, or about inbound AV, insert your company name, right? And check back and see what it tells you. If your LLM usage is dependent on having detailed context about your industry or your work, then that can be a really helpful approach. And then you can kind of see gaps and add more context from there to include the information that you want it to retain.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing point, and quite frankly, something I hadn't considered. It's but very, very powerful thing to do.
Yeah, I did it on myself and my ChatGPT account the other day, and it's a little bit spooky. It's a little bit, I'm a Black Mirror fan, so that kind of thing still trips me out, even though AI is not new to us anymore whatsoever.
So did ChatGPT know that you're a Black Mirror fan?
It didn't, but I wonder
Okay.
what I'm gonna ask it what TV shows it thinks I watch. What's
excellent.
it off this? Yeah, I'm curious to know. Oh, all right. So as we kind of teased in the beginning, there's one last update that is really important.
Yes, there is at that. And so Grem, you want to meet Grem. And what's Grem? Grem is a stuffed animal with a chatbot inside. And just that statement to me just opens up like a panorama of like possible bad outcomes, to tell you the truth. And so that's why I wanted to discuss it.
I think it's fascinating. So for a little bit of context, the way that this product, Grem, is marketed is a stuffed animal companion to children for parents who want their kids to be able to play independently when they're busy, but want them to have reduced screen time. I don't have kids myself, so I guess I can't comment on that aspect of it, but I don't know how this serves as a replacement for screen time that's all that much better.
I agree with you. And I think for me, it first of all throws up a bunch of questions. One of those questions is that chatbot self-contained within the stuffed animal, or is it potentially connected to the internet where it can get an update? And so that in itself is like two potentially different outcomes. Because as the chatbot maybe gets smarter, does that mean that you're going to have to buy your kiddo a new Grem every 6 months? And on the other side, if it's potentially connected to the internet, what are the safeguards to make sure that Grem doesn't go rogue on your kid, right? And so I think there's a lot to unpack and a lot of, this positive stuff. But to me, it's just, looking back on the iPhone and kids with tablets, we had no idea how impactful those technologies are going to be on our own selves, but I think much more importantly, on our kids. And I've always, when I'm out to dinner with my wife and, sit close to a family who basically stuffs a tablet in front of their 3-year-old kid, and I often think that's to just shut them up. And it's like there's not a good outcome from that. You want your kid interacting with everybody. I think that the negative repercussions for that, and I haven't read any studies, But I think the potential negative repercussions are wide-ranging and also can be very, very impactful. So now here's another potential device that could literally consume a kid, or maybe even be difficult for them to understand the difference between talking to Grem and actually conversing with your parents or another or a friend or another human being. It's a great thing to get you to listen to the end to talk about this, but at the same time, this is one that I'd have a lot of concern about.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point about how this could impact kids because they're so impressionable, because we're already seeing full-blown professional adults developing attachments to certain chatbots. I mean, people were really mad about GPT-5 because it's not as conversational as previous models of ChatGPT, because everybody gets super attached to the way that these programs speak to us. So there are some real impacts. And we forgot the most important part of the story, Peter, which is the spokeswoman for the product, which I think is an important detail.
Yeah, so one of the products is called Grem, one of the stuffed animals. One's called Grok, and the person who's the spokesperson is Grimes. And coincidence? I don't think so. But just very, very interesting. And also somebody who's naming their kids with mathematical equations is might not be the best person to promote this product for your kids.
Her selling point is, I'm really busy, so I think it's a great product to give your kid.
There it is. What more do we need to know?
Well, now that we've talked your ear off about something that you probably weren't expecting on the episode today, I think we'll leave it at that.
Sounds good. Yeah, so, as always, hit a subscribe button, give us a good review if you think you can. And we look forward to seeing you again.
Alrighty.